So that's the same thing, right? We take each term over 13 plus. Okay, we all know how to do that by now, I think. So then you need to simplify each term separately. So this first term was quite interesting in the sense that you had 13xy over 13xy, right? That's something divided by itself. That is just 1. So you can see I cancelled out the 13 and the 13, the x and the x, the y and the y. Okay, the answer there is just 1. Or we find that first term. So it's not that there's nothing. All right, that answer is not 0, guys. Remember, when you are cancelling a fraction out, you are dividing. Okay, so that's important. Make sure that you have that 1 there in the answer. For the next one, there's a minus in front. Okay, so we keep that minus. 26 divided by 13 is 2. X squared divided by x. Right, we say 2 minus 1. That's just 1 for that exponent. And the y's cancel each other out. Okay, so that one is minus 2x. So we find that middle term. Then for the last term, guys, and now you can see that I've highlighted it here. Maybe I'll just quickly erase that highlighter. Okay, now here, for that bit, you have your 59 divided by 13, which is 3, right? You have your x divided by x, which is just 1. But what we have in this denominator is a y. But there's no y at the top. You guys notice that? There's a y at the bottom of the fraction, but no y at the top. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight that again. So, no. So this y, oh dear, sorry. That y over there, there's no y at the top that I can cancel that off. Right? There's a y there and a y there, you can cancel it off. Or if you have a y with an exponent here, you could say that exponent is minus 1. But there is no y in the numerator. So that y in your answer still has to be in the denominator. Okay, and that's something we need. So if you have a y at the bottom that you can't cancel out, that y has to stay at the bottom. Okay, you can't decide, oh, I don't like having the y at the bottom, I'm going to move it to the top. Right, you have to keep the y at the bottom. So please make sure that for this answer, and do we understand why the 3 is at the top? Because if you have 3 as your answer, that's just the 3, right? But now you have to have a denominator and the y. Okay, and that is what I was practicing in yesterday's video, which I will explain again. More of these, where you actually left with stuff in the denominator. Okay, so just make sure that that y, because you can't cancel it out, there's no y at the top. You just have to have the y in the denominator of your answer. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. Not really. You guys are very confused. Okay, so the y there, you can't do anything with that y. You can't cancel it out, you can't move it anywhere, it just needs to stay in your answer. All right, we are going to do more examples like this just now. So if you're not quite understanding, hopefully when you do the other examples, it will go better. All right, now for C, like I said also in yesterday's, when we were marking this, I want you just to ignore that bit. All right, that second answer. This is probably how you would have done it. This is how we did it in class. Again, you are splitting each term up, each term over 8t squared. Then you just need to simplify each of them separately. All right, 64 divided by 8 is 8, and it's a negative, right? A negative divided by positive is negative. T cubed divided by t squared is t to the 1. So 3 minus 2 for that exponent there. Then plus 48 divided by 8 is 6. The t squareds can actually cancel out, right? You have the same thing at the top and the bottom. And then for the next one, minus 16 divided by 8 is 2. And when you have t to the 1, right? Minus 2, that's t to the negative 1. And if you watched yesterday's video, you will already know that we actually need to write this with a positive exponent. But when you did this, homework, this answer is fine. Any questions on C? All right, for D, this is where I did make a mistake. Yes, that one is supposed to be 1 over 4, not just 4. Thank you for that. So this one, oh dear. This one, sorry. That must be. Guys. Oh, thank you. Okay, so this Now, if there's a 1 over 4, how do you think we're going to write that, guys? You actually have two options, right? So you can write 1 over 4 as a fraction like that. And then what else is left in our answer? The x squared y, right? So you can write it like that if you want. But another way, and it's fine if you didn't, you don't even have to, but another way of writing this is actually to just put x squared y over 4. Maybe just add that as a little note on the side. Okay, those two are equivalent expressions. They mean the same thing. We have the fraction in front of the variables, or you can put the variables at the top and then have the 4 in the denominator. I feel like we have maybe looked at that once before. I know it seems familiar to you, guys, or maybe not. Because maybe you're not doing 5 divided by 20 is 1 over 4. Maybe you're saying, how many times does 5 go into itself? Once. And how many times into 20? 4. So then it looks like you have x squared y at the top and 4 at the bottom. You see that? Right? So you are more than welcome to write it like this, right? It means the same thing. But this is also fine. If you wrote it as a quarter x squared y, that's also okay. Any questions on D? For this one, just important 15 over 20, you have to write that as 3 over 4, please. All right? This is a fraction that you can't, 15 doesn't go into 20, 20 doesn't go into 15, so you just have to simplify it like we did last time, I think. You need to look for a number that goes into both 15 and 20, and that will be 5. Okay. You don't even have to write this divided by 5 divided by 5. Then you can just write the answer, that's fine. If is there at the bottom, again, you can ignore this bit over here. We'll talk about that now. Now, the thing with F, and I did speak through it the other day in class, it looks like you have 2 terms in the denominator, right? You do in the beginning. You have a 5x cubed plus a 3x cubed. And guys, you can't just split the fraction up if you have 2 terms at the bottom. You are only allowed to have 1 term. So here, luckily, these two are like terms. 5x cubed and 3x cubed. So you can turn that into 1 term. Yes. I see. Yes, thank you. All right, so back to what I was saying, guys. You have to add these two together, right? 5x cubed plus 3x cubed is 8x cubed. Yes? You have to do that first before you can start splitting your fractions, unfortunately. And in grade 8, that will always happen, guys. You will never get, that's why I said you must be about 3. You will never get a question where you can't simplify the bottom to 1 term. Okay, with these fractions. You will always be able to simplify the bottom to 1. Okay, then you have to split the fraction up, that over x cubed, that over x cubed, that over x cubed. Alright, and then simplify each of them separately. So here, your x cubed cancelled out, which is quite nice. 16 divided by 8 is just 2. There, your 8's cancel out. So you have x to the 2 minus 3, right? That's where that negative 1 is coming from. And for the next one, 24 divided by 8 is 3. And then you're going to say x to the 4 minus 3, which is x to the 1. Any other question on that one? All right, let's look at G. G was another one where you have to first simplify the denominator. We do have 1 term in the denominator, but it's not written in a very nice way, right? It's easier to simplify if we don't have something with a bracket next to it. Okay, so I suggest that you do multiply these two together. Now guys, these are like terms, yes, but it doesn't actually matter when we're times it. Okay, when we are multiplying, you're going to say 2 times 3 is 6. A times A is A squared, and B times B is B squared. Okay, so again, you have to do that first before you split your fraction up. So you're going to take that over that, plus the middle term over the denominator, minus the last term over the denominator. Okay, and then simplify each of them separately. So 6 and 6 will cancel each other out. and the b squared, right? So actually all you need to do here is a to the 4 divided by a squared. So 4 minus 2 is 2. So the next one, plus 12 divided by 6 is 2. The a squareds cancel each other out. You are left with b to the 4 divided by b squared. So 4 minus 2 is then 2. And for the last one, that minus 18 divided by 6 is 3. The a squareds cancel out and the b squared. Okay, so your answer to that last one is just minus 3. All right. Okay, then 8 was quite complicated in the sense that there were lots of signs going on, right? The actual splitting up the fraction and simplifying was the same as with all the others, but there was an extra thing with all the signs, which is what I was highlighting and stuff if you watched the video from me. Okay, so don't get confused with all of those highlighting things now. We're going to go through this step by step. So for h, do we see that we have 4 terms in the numerator, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. In the denominator, this is one term, but again, like in the previous question, let's first multiply those two things together so that the denominator is simpler. Okay, we don't want to work with something multiplied by a bracket. Okay, so you're going to say 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. So that minus that I highlighted there is from just showing you that it's the negative 9. Then you have an x squared and you have a y squared. Okay, are we fine with this, guys? This would give you 1 mark. Okay, if this was a question in a test or in an exam, you would get 1 mark for doing that. Next up, you now need to split the fraction up like we've been doing all the time. All right, so you're going to say that over that. But now, guys, can you see that I highlighted that minus every time I used it? Because now the denominator is negative. So when you split your fraction up, all your terms will be over that negative thing, all right? So it's this over negative 9x squared y squared. Then this minus is coming, right? The minus in front of the fraction is coming from that minus there, okay? This term over negative 9x squared y squared. Plus, that plus is going there. This term over negative 9x squared y squared. And then that minus is coming from the fraction, minus in front of the fraction, 63xy over negative 9x squared y. As if you leave out even one of those minuses, your answer is going to be wrong. Okay, so you need to be very careful when you're working with negatives, especially. And also, there's a lot going on, right? There's lots of numbers, lots of x's, y's. It's easy to leave something out by accident. So when you're doing these, just try and take it slow, step by step. Now we're going to simplify each fraction separately. So 18 divided by negative 9 is negative 2. Do we agree with that? Right? Positive divided by negative is a negative. The x squareds cancel out and the y squareds cancel out. So that is what I'm getting from my first bracket. Now, my next fraction was a minus. There was a minus in front. So that minus is going there again. Right? Which is why I circled it to show that that minus is that minus thing. When we are simplifying this, guys, what's a positive divided by a negative? Positive divided by a negative is a negative. So we have a minus that was in front of the fraction, but then our answer is also negative. Right, which is why I put brackets here. Okay, remember when we worked with negative numbers at the beginning of the year? If you have like 2 minuses next to each other, you have to put a bracket around it. Okay, you can't just write 2 minuses. So you're confusing. Then 36 divided by 9 is 4. Your y squared are going to cancel out. You're left with x to the 4 divided by x squared. So 4 minus 2 is 2. Okay, so this in brackets here is the answer to this fraction. But there was a minus in front. So we need to repeat that minus. Okay, and that's why I did all these circling and highlighting and stuff. For the next term, the next fraction, there was a plus in front, so that plus must now go in front of the answer. Okay, when I do 54 divided by negative 9, that's negative 6. X squared divided by x squared is 1, right? They cancel out. And y to the 4 divided by y squared is y squared. Okay, last one. Minus in front, so minus in front. Now again, positive divided by negative is a negative, right? And then you do that simplified. Now here we ended up with negative exponents. Okay, so don't worry about that last line. Yours is fine if it looks like that. We ended up with negative exponents because you're going to say 1 minus 2 and 1 minus 2. So that's where that came from. So that normally that would be the end. That would be the final answer. But unfortunately, we can't leave it with all these brackets. Okay, negative 2 is just there. But what's a negative times a negative? A positive. So you have to sort that out. Okay, you have to actually say negative times negative is positive 4x squared. Then you have a positive times a negative, which is a negative 6y squared. And for your last term, you have a negative times a negative, which is again a positive 7x to the negative 1y. Don't worry about that. We won't have that. Don't stress. Okay, does that make sense, guys? For that one. So that one is very complicated just because, firstly, there were 4 terms in the numerator, which is more than in all the others that you did. And, you know, lots of minuses and brackets and stuff like that. Okay, now I wanted you to, after seeing the explanation for H, to do I again, because maybe you didn't do I correctly. Okay, I is very similar to H. So I'll just show you quickly. This was the question in I, so just write that down, maybe just on a new piece of paper, you can just write sharp worksheet again. If you think that you did I correctly, if you understood H, that's fine, you don't have to redo it, but maybe just look through it and check if you actually did it correctly. So that is the question for I. So at the top, you have negative 81x squared y squared plus 21x minus 15xy plus 18x cubed y and then plus 9. And then at the bottom, we again have 2 terms. We have 9xy minus 12xy. Now I have done the first step for you. Okay, remember we can't split the fraction up if we have more than one term in the denominator. If we're looking at the original question, we have 2 terms, right? We remember that a minus will separate terms. But guys, are these like terms? 9xy and negative 12xy? Yes. So I can actually simplify that to 1. So 9xy minus 12xy is negative 3xy. Okay, so I've done that first step for you. Up so that you can see it. Okay, so the first step is done for you. I would like you now to do the rest of that question. Okay, this one is similar to H because the denominator is negative. So you're going to have to divide by negative 3xy every time. Okay, so you can do that one on your own. And guys, in the last term, you'll see when you split your fraction up, there's something funny happening in the last term as well, which we spoke about earlier today. Let's see if we can figure that one out. I'll just give you a few minutes and we'll look at it. If you're done with I, you can do J so long as well. You'll have to just look at the note on Classroom for that, but you can if you can get on. Otherwise, you can just wait. Yeah, you guys done? Okay. So guys, let's take a look. So let's go term by term. We all fine with this. Hey, 9xy minus 12xy is negative 3xy. Now you split your fraction up. So that term over the denominator plus that term over the denominator minus 15xy over the denominator plus that one over the denominator plus 9 over the denominator. So that the signs in between the terms in your numerator, those are the signs that go in between the fractions. Okay, I hope you guys are getting that right. So there's a plus there, so there must be a plus in front of that fraction. There's a minus there, so there must be a minus in front of that fraction. Okay, so you're not changing signs when you're splitting your fraction up. All right, that's very important. Now we need to simplify. Okay, we have a negative sign, or sorry, divided by a negative, which is a positive, right? 81 divided by 3 is 27. Now you have x squared divided by x. That's just x. And then you have y squared divided by y. That is just y. Any questions on that first fraction? Simplifying that one. Now, guys, there's a plus in front of the next fraction. So the plus must go in front of the answer. We're simplifying that fraction. But now when we simplify the fraction, we're going to get a negative answer. That's why I'm putting it in brackets. Okay, so that I don't have two signs next to each other. There must be a bracket separating them. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. So if you want to highlight that, the minus, because the answer is negative, that minus is going inside your bracket in front of that answer. Okay, sorry, that's not very clear. Let me show you that minus there. Now, guys, if we're looking at the 21 divided by 3, that is 7, right? So we find it is 7. X divided by x is just 1. Okay, so we're canceling out those x's. But this is similar to the example that we looked at on the previous page. There's a y in the denominator, but there's no y in the numerator that can cancel it out. You see, there's no y up here. So I can't do anything with that y unless you put it on at the bottom. Okay, so if there was a y at the bottom, you use that y at the bottom.
So, up on 36, X, Y, D, yeah. Subtracted by 3 is 1. Subtraction 3 all the way is 1. So function convert that to if we did it would be 3x to negative 1 y.
Okay, but if it was just a 3x1. Okay, guys, so we are at this y at the bottom. It's a new concept, it's a bit difficult, but it's just because you had a y in your denominator originally, and there's no y at the top to cancel that out. So you have to keep that y in the denominator. Okay, it is difficult to know. All right, next up, the minus, that's the sign in front of the fraction, so that was going in front of what we get when we simplify that fraction. 15 divided by negative 3, do we agree that that's negative 5? Right, the positive divided by negative is a negative. So again, this minus in the denominator is causing us to have a negative answer. 15 divided by 3 is 5. And then x cancels out x and y cancels out y. So I'm actually just left with a negative 5 for that. Any questions on that one, right? Then there's a plus in front of the next fraction, so that plus must go in front of that solution. So we can simplify it. What's a positive divided by negative? Negative. So that's why I'm using a bracket to separate the plus and the minus. If there was no minus, you wouldn't have to put a bracket. Okay, so if it's just a positive divided by positive, that's fine. 18 divided by 3 is 6. If we're looking at the y's here, those two y's cancel each other out. But we do have x cubed divided by 8. Now guys, what's 3 minus 1? 2. Okay, so that's where that x squared is coming from. Next one, plus. Now this is a difficult one, guys. It's similar to the 7 of y that we spoke about earlier. That plus must go in front of the answer to the fraction. What's 9 divided by 3? 3, but there's a minus, right? So it's actually negative. So again, the fact that our denominator is negative is causing that answer, that fraction, when we simplify it, to be negative. Now 9 divided by 3, you guys just said that that's 3, right? So you'll say 3 like that. 3 goes into the top, 1 goes into 9, 3 times. Okay, so that 3 has to be at the top. But guys, do I have an x, y at the top? There's no variables at the top. Hey, it's just a 3 that's going to be at the top now. And what is left in the denominator? An x and a y that I can't do anything with. There's no x, y in the numerator. There's nothing at the top that can cancel or change the x, y at the bottom. So the x, y at the bottom has to stay at the bottom when you simplify it. Yes? No? Okay, then all we had to do after that was you had to sort out your signs. So the first one was find 27xy, and you just really write that. Positive times a negative is a negative. And negative times a negative is a positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. And then for the last term, a positive times a negative again is a negative. Okay, I would like you guys to do J quickly. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit and then do this rather. So in J, again, I've done the first step for you. Because again, we have multiple terms in the denominator, guys. You see that we have 3 terms in that denominator. So we can't put the fraction up if we have 3 terms. We have to only have 1 term. So that means that 3 terms are like terms. So we can actually simplify that. 15x squared minus 9x squared is what? 15 minus 9? 6, right? So 6x squared. Plus another 2x squared is 8x squared. Remember guys, when you're adding and subtracting, you just change the number in front of the variable. Okay, so they stay x squared. So do the rest of that question. Because guys, we want splitting that fraction up. This one is an active multiplication. It's not a negative number. Okay, so you're not going to have to worry about all those brackets and pluses and minuses and stuff. But there is something else that's a trend in this question. So we just need to that one. Okay, is that done? Okay. All right. So just writing up, right? Each term in the numerator over 8x squared. Now you need to simplify each one separately. So there was something interesting about the second term and the last term. The first one was okay, was straightforward. 24 divided by 8 is 3. X cubed divided by x squared, you'll say 3 minus 2. Right? That's just 1. But then you have a y at the top, guys. There's no y at the bottom, so we just leave that y there. Okay, you're not moving that y anyway. It's just next to the x. And we find the first term. For the second one, you have 64 divided by 8, it's just 8. What happens with these x's? This is x to the 1, right? Over x to the 2. So you're going to say 1 minus 2, which is negative 1. Okay, that's where that x to the negative 1 comes from. And then again, you have a y there. You have no y in the denominator, so the y just needs to carry down to your answer. Now for the next one, the last one, 36 over 8. Right? Does 8 go into 36 perfectly? No, but you can simplify it, right? What number goes into 36 and 8? 4. Okay? So you can say how many times does 4 go into 36? 9 times. That's where that 9 comes from. So I'm saying 36 divided by 4. And then 8 divided by 4 is 2. So that's where that 2 comes from. So that in your answer, you have to have 9 at the top and the 2 at the bottom. Okay. What else is at the top? A y squared. Is there a y at the bottom? No. So the y squared just needs to be at the top in my answer. And at the bottom, we have an x squared. We have no x at the top. So again, that x squared just needs to be in my answer at the bottom of the graph. Okay. Any questions, guys? All right, I'm going to now, everyone I'll follow it. I'm going to now go through what I did in the lesson yesterday in the video. Because if you couldn't get on yesterday, you won't be able to get on. Okay, guys, so if you copied this down yesterday, you don't have to write anything now. You can just pay attention. That is the new heading. Leaving answers with positive exponents. I will move to the side now so that you can see what I've written in the highlights text. Write down the heading quickly. Yep. Okay, so the heading is leaving answers with positive exponents. And we're just going to do some examples so that I can, so I can show you how that works. Now the instruction here is just saying simplify the following, leaving all answers with positive exponents. Okay, so that's what you have to write in. Leaving all answers with positive exponents. Okay, now guys, going forward, all right, you are not going to actually be allowed to leave your answers with negative exponents. In grade 9, negative exponents is quite a big thing. All right, it's a whole section on its own. You spend maybe like 3-4 days just working with negative exponents and how to make them positive. All right, but I'm going to show you guys now how to do it. It's actually not that hard. All right, so we've now practiced the whole top exponent minus bottom exponent. That makes it. All right, I think we are mostly kind of okay with dividing. Maybe not, but we also have some more practice. We're not moving on yet. But now, what do you do when you're actually getting a negative exponent? How do you make that exponent positive? Now, just for the purposes of these examples, I want us to go back to the basics. All right, so for number 1, just write that down, please. That's the first example that we're going to do. And we are going to, just for now, pretend that we don't know that top exponent minus bottom exponent thing. All right, just so that we can see how we could possibly do it differently. Now, guys, do you remember when we started dividing, we did the expansion at the top, expansion at the bottom, and we cancelled out. Let's do it now again. 3x is just 3 times x, right? And x cubed is x times x times x. Now, guys, if we're looking at it this way, is there something at the top and the bottom that I can cancel out? An x, right? I have an x at the top that I can cancel out one of the x's at the bottom. But now do I have another x at the top to cancel out another x at the bottom? No. What's left at the top? 3. And what's left at the bottom, right? X times x. And I'm going to write it as x times x. X times x is x squared. So that's another way of looking at it. Instead of just saying, I'm taking the top exponent minus the bottom exponent, is to actually ask yourself, what is at the top and what is at the bottom and what can I cancel out? And when I cancel out, what's left? Okay, so that's what we're going to practice. So again, we did the expansion for 3x. We wrote it as 3 times x. We did the expansion for x cubed. We wrote it as x times x times x. We were able to cancel out 1x at the top with 1x at the bottom. But now I'm left with a 3 at the top and an x squared at the bottom. So that is then your final answer. Okay, if you wanted to do it in the other way, which is fine, I'm just going to show you how to then go from the negative exponent to one with a positive answer. So if you had this, I'm just going to write 4 on the side. If you had your 3x over x cubed, you would say, what's 3 divided by 1? That is just 3, right? Then you have your x. What exponent of x do I have at the top? What's the exponent of x here? A 1. So you would say 1 minus the 1 at the bottom, which is 3. You get 3x to the, what's 1 minus 3? Negative 2. Now guys, if we're looking at our two answers, if we compare them, right? If we see we have 3x to the negative 2, but that's actually the same as 3 over x squared. What you are going to do, and this is what they focus on a lot in grade 9, is if you have a negative exponent, right? So my x now has a negative exponent. To make that exponent positive, you need to move it to the bottom. Okay, so this is not a fraction at the moment. If we're going to turn it into a fraction, the 3 is going to stay at the top, right? What is the exponent of 3 here? 1 actually. Okay, so the 3 does not have a negative exponent. I'm going to leave the 3 where it is. But the x is going to move to the bottom of the fraction. Okay, so we're going to turn this into 3 at the top over x squared at the bottom. I'm just going to make a note here on the side. Move the variable with a negative exponent to the bottom. Then you're welcome to choose either method. Right, you can decide what you want to do. If you are confident of making out with this whole top exponent minus bottom exponent thing, you want to keep using it, it's fine. But from now on, if you're getting a negative exponent, you need to do that extra step where whatever has a negative exponent, you're going to move down to the bottom. Thank you. Now, guys, I want us quickly to go back before we do the next example. Let's quickly go back to the stuff that we just marked. That we should note. Let's see if we can find ones that have negative exponents and if we can then change those. For J, yes. So let's look at J. Do you see that in J, in the middle term, we had a negative exponent for x? I want you guys to highlight that, please. You can highlight it or you can underline it or circle it, whatever you want. That x has a negative exponent. So from now on, if you're getting something like that in a question, you need to change that negative exponent to a positive exponent. Okay? So I'm going to show you 2 different ways in which you could do it, guys. Let's just write down this middle term. If you have space next to the question, do it next to the question. I have some space underneath. Okay, so just that middle term was 64xy over 8x squared. So now you have those 2 options. Okay, I'm going to practice both options. You can say, what's 64 divided by 8? 8, all right? X and x squared. Now guys, that means that I have 1 x at the top. How many x's do I have at the bottom? 2 x's, okay? Maybe I should rewrite it like this. Let's do the actual expansion rather, so that you can see it a bit more clearly. Eventually, you will be able to do it without having to do the expansion. Okay, but while you're still getting used to it, let's start to do the expansion so that you can see exactly what's happening. Okay, so now when we do the canceling out, you're going to say 64 and 8, that's 8. All right? This x at the top is going to cancel out one of the x's at the bottom. Can I cancel out anything else? No, hey, I can't cancel out that y because there's no y at the bottom. I can't cancel out the second x because there isn't a second x at the top. So now if you have it like this, guys, let's circle everything that's left. There's an 8 left at the top. There's a y left at the top. And at the bottom, we have an x. So how am I going to write that? 8y, thank you, over x. Okay, that's quite nice actually if you visualize it as what's at the top, what's at the bottom, what's left. Okay, but it is going to take some practice, so don't rush yourself. It will take some practice, but guys, like I said, if you prefer this method, where you do your top exponent minus your bottom exponent, you will end up with that term that we had in that answer, right? 8x to the negative 1 y. Now we can't leave that with that negative exponent, so like we did at the top, let's highlight that x to the negative 1. Does 8 have a negative exponent? No. What is the exponent of 8 here? 1. What is the exponent of y? Also 1. X is the only thing with a negative exponent, so x is the only thing that I'm going to move to the bottom. Okay, so here I'll just make a little note. Move x to the bottom. So this is actually going to become the same thing, right? It's the same answer here. The 8 and the y are going to stay at the top because they don't have negative exponents. I'm not going to move them. The x to the negative 1, I am going to move to the bottom, and the exponent is just going to be positive 1. You don't have to write. Any questions? And guys, our time is running out. I don't think we have time for another example. Maybe let me just see where else did we have a negative exponent in the answer. For f, can we go back to f quickly? This is also from the sharp worksheet. Just really like that. Okay, this was our answer, right? So our middle term again had a negative exponent. Now guys, this is an interesting one because there's nothing else in this term, right? There's just an x. There's no number there. But what number is actually in front of x? If there's no number written, we know that there is actually a 1. Please put that 1 there in a different color. All right, in your answer, you wouldn't, if you just left it as x is negative 1, you wouldn't write that 1 there in front. But now, guys, if I have to make this exponent positive, what must I move to the bottom? What has a negative exponent be? X. What's going to stay at the top? 1. Okay, because that's the number that's in front of x. In the previous question, there was an 8. What was it? It was an 8. So the 8 stayed at the top. Now we have a 1 in front. So this, you can just write maybe on the side or underneath if you have space. This final answer will be 2 minus 1 over x plus 3x. So that's if you want to first do your negative exponent and then move it, which you are more than welcome to do. But if you didn't want to do that, right? If you just wanted to go from this, I'll do it on the side there. You have your 8 divided by x, which is just 1. Now you have x times x over 3 of them, right? X times x times x. Thank you. Now the two x's at the top, guys, are going to cancel out two x's at the bottom. So what's left? One x at the bottom, and what's left at the top? Okay, it looks like there's nothing left, right? But what do we actually get when we say x divided by x is 1, right? And that x divided by x is again 1. So at the top I'm left with a 1, and at the bottom I'm left with an x. Okay, so you would get the same answer there, 1 over x. Okay, guys, I'm not going to give you any homework. I just want you to kind of absorb that. Tomorrow we'll do 2 more examples, and then you're going to practice some on your own. All right, so if you're a bit confused, still don't stress. We are going to practice more of them. Okay. There are still 4 minutes left to just don't break the day down, please. But you can chat quietly if you want. Yeah.